Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amma ba'd. Our esteemed panelists, distinguished lecturers, researchers, faculty members, students, respected colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, who are joining us here at INSEF University, at this auditorium, and those joining us online from all over the world, from Indonesia, from the Philippines, India, Turkey, and also Maldives, and many more. Alhamdulillah, selamat datang, welcome, ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum to INSEF Discourse Series 3 entitled the Islamic Macroeconomic Model Moving Towards Riba-Free Economy. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Wan Arif Ahmad from INSEF Endowment Fund, and I am delighted to be your MC for today. Before we begin the discourse today, allow me to ask for the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the following dua. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds, Master of the Day of Judgment. Let your blessing and your peace be on your servant and your messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and on his family and his companions. Ya Allah, on this beautiful day, in this gathering of ilm, we raise our hands, Ya Allah, to pray gratefully and to thank you for your infinite favor upon us. O Allah, we ask your blessings to make this occasion a success. We ask you, Ya Allah, for knowledge which is beneficial and sustenance which is good and deed which are acceptable. Allahumma barik lana fi Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar wa qina adhaban nar wa qina adhaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa barak wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Amin. Allahumma amin. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our speaker and commentator for today. The first is Dr. Mabit Al-Jarhi, a professor of economics and finance at the Social Sciences University of Ankara in Turkey. Dr. Mabit will be putting forth the case for the Islamic macroeconomic model, sharing his view with all of us today on how we can vacate the interest rate economy, which in reality is only an administered price with no connection to economic fundamentals. As a result, using the interest rate as a benchmark or a monetary policy tool produces unpredictable results. Dr. Mabit, inshallah, will be presenting first, which will then be followed by comments from by Prof. Dr. Turalay Kench, a professor here at INSEF University and a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Turkey. Professor Turalay holds a PhD in economics from the University of York. He has accumulated several years of industry and academic experience working in different countries in the UK, China, Kazakhstan, and Malaysia. His academic achievements include academic position at Cambridge, Imperial College London, Manchester, Birkbeck College London, Durham, and Bradford Universities. Industry experience ranges from being the former deputy governor of the Central Bank of the Republic of Turkey to the board member of the Cambridge Endowment for Research in Finance and to chairing deputies G20 meetings on the global economy and financial regulation. Great to have both of you today, Prof. And without further ado, I invite both gentlemen, Prof. Mabit and also Prof. Turalai, on stage. Okay, with that, Prof. Mabit, the floor now is yours. Tafadhal.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم لا يسر إلا ما يسرته فيسر لنا كافة أمورنا. It is really my pleasure to be here with you. I have been a teacher in SIF some time ago, and I really enjoyed being here. And I am also glad that the organizers of this activity have chosen a Turkish scholar to comment in it, which is actually my good luck, simply because although I am originally from Egypt, but I am a Turkish citizen. So it gives me this is one of the sources of my pride, because you see, after all, Turkey was the seat of the Ottoman Empire, the last Islamic state that we have ever had as Muslims. Not only that, the Ottomans spread Islam all over the world. And if you found Islam in the most unlikely country, it would be because of Turkey, or because of the Ottomans, rather. Even the coffee that they brought me here was carried all over the world by Turks. There is also another incident, but I will not go. I will stop after that. You see, the pillars that they were built in the Byzantine palaces had what it's called crowns. These are the top ornament that is in the top and on the pillar. And Muhammad al-Fatih, the Sultan that conquered Constantinople, promised that he would enable Muslims to sit on the crowns of the pillars. And when you go to an area, to the city where those palaces were, you will find that they have cut those crowns and made them as seats on the ground. So alhamdulillah, Turkey and all the Ottomans have served the dignity of Islam. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now shall I start? What? Yes. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I want to speak to you about two topics. The first one that has not been actually handled by Islamic economics yet. The main ideas came to me, and when I started talking or giving a lecture, the lecture of the IDB prize, what is so wrong about it, about the rate of interest? Why should we have Islamic economics? Because if we don't have any problem with the rate of interest, then we might as well accept conventional economics. Another idea is that, or another question is that, can we technically evaluate the theories of interest? Can we look at the revolutions that were made against conventional economics before us and benefit from that? Of course, the man who made the first and only revolution against neoclassical economics was John Maynard Keynes in Cambridge. Keynes actually had no problem whatsoever with market capitalism. And I have yet to see some economists in the West who can criticize that. Of course, they can talk about equity and say sometimes, but not all of them, environment. But you see, we Muslims have to launch double revolution. One against neoclassical economics and another one against market capitalism. Which means that we must have a theory, actually two theories, microeconomic theory and macroeconomic theory. And we must also have a model, a structure, what we call an economic system, macroeconomic system. Now let's see now, where can we start, or where can we start our attack? We have now the Ottoman artillery. This is actually not a very serious thing, because the Ottoman artillery was the decisive element in winning any battle the Ottomans launched anywhere. So where do we direct our Ottoman artillery? When you read economics from A to Z, you will find that we economists have an aggregation problem. We cannot add. We cannot say 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 and 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. That's the problem. In the first volume of my book, I explained that we teach our students, when you read in a textbook in economics, that the individual demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, how do you get the market demand curve? You sum those curves horizontally, and that's fine, no problem. And we teach our students that it exists in every book, but it is dead wrong. Why is it wrong? Who says it's wrong? It's not me. There are 3 economists whose ideas have formed what is called the Sonnenschein-Mantel-Depreux condition. Now, what does its condition say? It says if you want to aggregate, you must have the same preferences. Your utility function must be the same for everyone. In other words, we will force the model of Ibn Tufayl. You know, Ibn Tufayl is a Muslim philosopher who lived in Andalusia, and he wrote a book which is called Hayy ibn Yaqdan. One person who got, he found himself on an island. He was raised by a deer, and he lived one society, one person. So in this particular society of Hayy ibn Yaqdan, invented by Ibn Tufayl, you can aggregate. But in other society, you don't. So this is no aggregation. First, if preferences must be the same. The other condition, which is even much worse, that all commodities must be homothetic. What do you mean by homothetic? يعني just let's simplify it. It is if your income increases by 1%, then you increase your consumption of bread by 1%, of meat by or everything by 1%. In other words, you have a straight line, Edgeworth line. It would be a straight line or parallel lines. So this is also ridiculous. These homothetic commodities are the exception. Very exceptionally, I don't know if you can find one. So here, what does that mean to the theory of interest? The theory of interest gives you a rate of interest, which is purportedly, or they claim, it comes from the demand and supply of money. And it expresses the social rate of time preference. In other words, it reflects or summarizes the time preference of everybody for every commodity in. And it is, of course, the opportunity cost of money. You cannot put money in an investment that does not give you anything lower, at least equal. It must be higher than the rate of interest. Now, which means that we have summed up all of these time, functions of the time preference. Everybody has different rates of time preference for different commodities. Of course, the urgency of bread, the time urgency of bread is not like the time urgency of a Mercedes, okay? Or a TOG, as you know, the car that is now produced in Turkey, the electric Turkish car, or the the second thing, that the same commodity should have different time preferences for different people. Not only that, for the same individual, the same commodity could have different rates of time preference at different times. So we have so much differences. You cannot sum up those functions of time preference over the whole society and reduce them to the rate of interest. So this is the aggregation problem is a good reason to reject what? The information content of the time preference, of the rate of interest. That the rate of interest does not reflect the fundamentals of the economy. It's not related to anything. If you change the rate of interest, what happens in the economy? Fundamentals, as far as fundamentals, you cannot predict that. We have no theory of a transmission mechanism that goes from fundamentals to the rate of interest. It is impossible. You cannot figure it out. The second thing, okay, which market, in which market the rate of interest is determined? Can you find the market? Of course, in the United States, they will tell you the government bonds. But who plays in this market? It's only the government and those who want to hold bonds. Okay? It's not really, it does not express a wide, the wide picture of the credit market of the whole economy. So it looks like there is no market. So how is it determined? Yes, the central bank. The central bank has a monetary policy committee. They get together and decide what the rate of interest is. How is it decided? You know, one time I asked Paul Samuelson, I met him several times at UCLA. Of course, I also met Milton Friedman too. He taught me a course in the optimal supply of money, also at UCLA. So I asked him, Paul, what if you go inside? If at that time he was the chairman of the Presidential Committee of Economic Advisors. The president has a committee of three people, and Samuelson was one of them. I don't know why Muslim countries do not do that. I have Egypt, the appoint a very يعني non-distinguished figure, is not even an economist as a governor of a central bank. So I asked him, okay, you walked inside the White House, the Oval Office, and the president asks you, what is your estimate of our growth rate for the United States this year? I was just trying to catch him on something. So he said, very simple. I think of a ceiling, I think of a floor, and I take a midpoint and I give it to the president. That's how. So it's just like magic, like saying some kind of a strange words, and somehow the shaitan will give you the estimate. No systematic way of decide what the interest rate should be. Of course, it's easier to say, okay, we need to raise it or we need to use it, but where to put it first, we don't know. So actually here, the rate of interest is not determined in any market. Once the central bank sets the rate, this becomes the prime rate. Every bank adds its margin depending on the customer creditworthiness. That's all what happens. So what's wrong with that? It's very wrong. Why? Because there is no mechanism that gives you an equilibrium interest rate. Suppose those people negotiated the cost of credit with the banks. The market will balance to some rate. Like suppose, and this is the point that I want to make. In the case of an Islamic finance, you go to the bank, he tells you, you want to finance your car through Murabaha, I'll charge you 5%. He said, no, make it 4%. There is a negotiability. But this negotiability is not with banks. It's all imposed by the central bank. So, of course, there are some countries which impose rates on Islamic banking. I think one of them is Malaysia. You see what I mean? This is unfortunate because they deprive the market or the economy from the equilibrating processes, negotiations between banks and customers on the rates of murabaha or musharaka or salam or whatever. So here we can see here that there is no market, there is no equilibrium process. The equilibrium process was so important, especially to John Robinson, who was one of the colleagues of Keynes in Cambridge. She explicitly said that market capitalism has no mechanism that produces equilibrium. And of course, the money market or the rate of interest is an obvious example of this. You cannot really deny that. So you have a rate here that you don't know. I'm not saying that it is not related to fundamentals, but you don't know how. Somehow it might be, but you don't know how. At the same time, it does not come from a market process. And this is very strange in a capitalist economy because in those capitalists always talk about markets as if it's called market capitalism. But why market is missing in this particular point? You cannot explain that. So we say if we had Islamic finance and if we allowed negotiations between customers and banks, we will have indicators that can be used for policy. And that comes to the Islamic macroeconomic structure. So the conclusion with respect to the theories of the rate of interest, they are illogical, have no basis, cannot be accepted, and the rate of interest itself is totally useless as a policy tool, or as even an anchor. So there goes the rate of interest. So we have now a justification for a branch of the human knowledge. We call it Islamic economics, that has no interest rate. Okay, how do you do that? Now, it is this not intuitively easy to construct an economy without rate of interest. Now, let me just show you why. Milton Friedman and Paul Samuelson have a theory that the rate of interest, a positive rate of interest, would be inefficient. So Milton Friedman, in his optimum supply of money theory, says it costs nothing to produce money. You just print it. The printing machine. Have you ever seen the printing machine? No? You have? Okay. I have never seen one. And if I see a printing machine, I mean money printing machine, I will just grab it. I will not let go. Okay. So, but you put costs on it, so it is inefficient. People would try to economize on using money in transactions in order to gain interest, which means they will withdraw money from the real sector to the financial sector. And actually this point is made somehow, but not so professionally by President Erdogan, when they tell him raise the rate of interest because the lira is going down. He refuses because of that. So this is what I call the Samuelson-Friedman inefficiency. Samuelson has also a model, which is, Samuelson was just all mathematics walking on its feet, or his feet. So he has a model which he call it without the social contrivance of money. What is their solution? Friedman tells you, you deflate the economy until the rate of interest becomes zero. So he is calling for a zero-bound monetary policy, a rate of interest. Samuelson does not give a recommendation, but it leads to the same. His analysis leads to the same result. There is another economist called Hosios. It sounds like a Greek name, Hosios. Hosios says, if you are, and this is a more sophisticated theory, if you are in an imperfect economy, you have a search economy. Everybody searches for prices before trading. So you might oversearch. And if you oversearch, you're getting more information. You cannot sell it. So you don't search as much, which means that you do not conclude as many or the optimum level of transactions that would make the level of the GDP optimum. So this is a second type of inefficiency, which is named after Hosius. So the rate of interest is meaningless as a monetary policy tool, is meaningless as a benchmark or as an anchor, and also it causes problems. And solution of a zero rate of interest is ridiculous. Who is going to lend money at a zero rate of interest? Who would a central banker accept to deflate the economy? It would be crazy. No central, whether the United States or England, Nobody considered that. It is only in the economic literature. So how you Muslim economists want to do it? You want I want to eliminate the rate of interest, but I don't want to reduce to zero. These are two different matters. How do you do that? First of all, I have 20 Islamic finance contracts. I will define them very well, and the central bank will allow all banks. Let's forget about distinguishing between banks which are Islamic and non-Islamic. We don't need that. All banks will be given these contracts. You give finance according to these contracts, but do not play the game of ruses with us. We do not. The central bank should have its own Sharia board, and we will not allow every bank to make its own products and have rules and so on. In other words, there is no fishing on Saturday. As I was telling His Excellency Dr. Kinj, that the Jews tried to deceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They dug holes next to the shore on Friday night, and the tide brought the fish to the holes, and they came on Sunday to pick up the fish. We do not fish on Saturday. So we are one of the most important rule in Islamic finance: no fishing on Saturday, no ruses. So this is the first step, to establish the 20 Islamic finance contracts, and to make sure that the banks would follow these contracts to the letter. The other thing here is that we are going to change the type of money we have, because what type of money do we have? It's a money which is based on lending. Why would the central bank issue money? To lend the government, to lend the banks, and banks to lend the customers. It's only lending after lending. They said, let's stop it. We do not want lending. We want to get rid of the lending in the economy. Why? Because you see, in the conventional economic system, we use some contract called the classical loan contract. What is the classical contract? Selling present money for future money, selling a quantity of present money for a higher quantity of future money. The difference, which is a premium that you pay, when we call it the rate of interest. So we want to get rid of that contract. So we want to get rid of lending. We want to keep financing, but without lending. We want to finance without lending. That's why I told you that it is not intuitively obvious. You finance, but you don't lend. So how do you do that? The central bank creates money and puts it as investment accounts in banks. And we will call these investment accounts central deposits. So how much money do you give to each bank? The central bank knows all about banks. So it will distribute this money among banks, or allocate money among banks, but according to efficiency rules. The most profitable bank, the bank that is successful in meeting risks and so on, should get more money. The second thing here is that you need a money market. You need an instrument through which you can apply monetary policy. Now, in the conventional economy, we have the government debt market. We don't want that. So we issue central deposit certificates. The proceeds would be invested as central deposits. And the rate of return on the central deposit certificates would be or can be used to estimate the real rate of growth of the economy. And the formula, I have the formula for this. I have given the two papers to one of our ladies here who was organizing, and I think I asked her to make them available to you. So you have the formula there. If you know the rate of return on CDCs, then you can estimate real growth. Why is it important to estimate the real growth? Because you see, what is so beneficial about money? Money benefits because it reduces transactions cost. But if the central bank issues $1, it will give you as much lower transactions cost as much as the commodities you buy for $1 or for a ringgit. Forget about the dollar now. So, but if prices are higher, if prices double, then this new ringgit will become 1/2 ringgit in real terms. So you want to maximize the transactions services of money, you have to keep prices constant. In other words, you have to keep absolute price stability. Okay. So you have absolute. So the absolute price stability is mandated not because of any bias, but it's because we want to maximize the services of the transactions, services of money. How do you keep the prices absolutely stable, zero rate of inflation? By equating the money, the rate of monetary expansion to the rate of growth. If the economy is growing at 5%, we grow money at 5%, 10%, 10%, and so on. So we keep it this way. And of course, that would have great benefits. After all, you cannot find any country in the world that has a zero inflation. Of course, you can have a country like Switzerland, which would have very little inflation. So your currency will appreciate against all currencies in the world. If you apply the Islamic macroeconomic model, you become an economic power. Why? Because if your currency is appreciating, everybody will hold your currency for a store of value, not just for a means of exchange, for a store of value. So the Egyptians who suffer from very high inflation, they can hold your currency. Okay, they're holding the dollars now, but they're getting a bad deal. If the Turkish government has its currency under this system, it will become an international power. Another thing here, that the central bank, once it issues money and it puts it in banks as central deposits, it becomes Rabbul Mal. Now, the bank goes in financing and makes profit. So the central bank becomes a share. So what economists call seigniorage, the right or the proceeds that should be earned from issuing money to the sovereign, and that this is the entitled to the everybody. I mean the whole society, because we all make money because we give it general acceptability. So I calculated this in a scenario for Turkey, and I found it could go up to 3 times tax and non-tax revenues. Okay, so what would the government do with all this money? Oh, it can get rid of sales tax because they have problems in allocation. If negative allocative effects. It can limit taxes on income to the highest brackets. So we transfer our society to give it much more economic equity. Or the government can't build the best up-to-date infrastructure. And you know that growth is related to infrastructure. So you have highly advanced communications, transportation, and other parts of your infrastructure. You have much higher growth. And that's why we can expect an Islamic country that follows this model to become an economic power, to reach very, very high growth rates. Another thing here that we can get is that banks are supposed to be, especially if they are working under good supervision by the central bank, they are supposed to be giving money for investors using the best possible criteria. So no bank will give money to an investor without a feasibility study. We have a president in Egypt, Sisi, who thinks that feasibility studies are a waste of time. Why? If I know that this project is good, why should I spend so much money on feasibility study? But banks would not accept that. So we have rationalization of investment, not only private investment, government investment, because you see the government cannot borrow. The central bank will not give it any money except for the seniorage. But so the money, if it wants to finance something, it has to go to a bank. And the bank will make sure that there is a feasibility study and the government investment fulfills rational conditions for a good investment. So even the whole investment environment in the country will become less risky, more rational. This is something that is not happening anywhere in the world. Of course, it was thought to be possible under central planning, but we know that the Soviet Union did not reach that. As a matter of fact, it reached the opposite. So how much more time do I have? Let me time. 3:20. 5 minutes, okay. I forgot to put my phone here so that I can see the time. So what I'm saying here is that the monetary policy, you have a market for CDCs. As I told you, the rate of return on CDCs, what I call RCDCs, can be used to estimate the real rate of growth. You want to increase the money supply, either you want to increase it by a lot, by a big quantity, you increase your CDs with banks. I'm talking about the central bank. If the central bank wants to increase it by a little bit, fine-tuning, then the buying and selling CDs or CDCs can do the job. So you have open market operations and CDCs in addition to the CDs in themselves with banks. So and the benefits, as I told you, are many, and any country applying this model, of course, the benefits would be rationalizing investment, both public and private. Of course, assuming that Islamic finance or banks would be allowed to work as universal banks. And if you are a student of economics here, please learn about the difference between commercial banking, which is common in Anglo-Saxon countries, and universal banking, and ask how come the British did not teach us, because they didn't have it. They're Anglo-Saxons. But the French, in their during their colonization of North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, and so on, did not introduce that. Other European countries also never introduced universal banking, although it is much better than commercial banking. So we will assume that those Islamic banks operate like commercial banks. Finally, this model is an orphan. It needs some adoption, okay? And I used the word orphan because يعني, we Muslims must be kind to orphans. Okay, so I need someone, if you know the Prime Minister of Malaysia, or the President of Turkey, or the President of Indonesia, these are the three countries I nominate for applying this model. Why? Because they have a higher measure of political freedom than other Muslim countries. Unfortunately, most Muslim countries live under oppressive regimes. Alhamdulillah, we don't have oppression here. I ran from the oppression of Egypt to Turkey, and alhamdulillah, they gave me a Turkish passport, which actually is very, very good. I'm really happy with it. So what I am saying, please help that orphan to be applied. I am I'm an old man now. I don't know whether I will live till next year or not, but I would like to see this model applied. Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for your patience, and I appreciate it.
Jazakallah, Prof. Dr. Magid. Thank you very much for the presentation and very interesting points. Now, I would like to pass the floor to Prof. Dr. Alai for comments. Prof.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Well, Prof. Mabit, thank you very much for this insightful and excellent speech. I'm really grateful that I read your papers, I walked through them, and I listened to you. And I'd like to congratulate you for working on this. Really, these are important issues that I'm glad that you have worked through and then try to develop models for Islamic macroeconomics. Well, I have background in monetary economics, so this is further interestful for me. Well, the issues that you covered a long time ago now became an issue in the presence of digital money, the central bank digital currency, basically. So it is very timely that we have this discourse today. I'm grateful that you came all the way from Turkey. So, by the way, this is my second gratefulness for you that you are living in Turkey and working there. And I have also another gratefulness for you that you only mentioned economist from Cambridge University in England. Given that my background and affiliation with the Cambridge University, I'm grateful for you doing that. Nobody from Oxford that you mentioned. That's good. So let me go through the monetary policy and then try to understand the model that Prof. Mabit developed. Well, the monetary policy initially, 100 years ago, was interested in achieving financial stability because we had gold standard. So the major issue is basically deflation and therefore financial stability. And then afterwards, we moved into another regime because of the fiat money. Then the inflation became an issue. Then what central banks did, thanks to Friedman and others, used or targeted monetary aggregate, right? So the monetary aggregate was the way of controlling or combating inflation. But later on, central bank realized that what is important is that they determine the cost of money. Okay, so when you determine the cost of money, the monetary aggregate basically useless, right? Because it determined endogenously in an economy. Take, for example, US these days, they have printing shamelessly money after money, okay? But it does not lead to inflation until recently. Why? Because at the same time, velocity of money declines drastically, right? So these are the things that we need to understand. Okay, let me come back to the model that Prof. Mabit developed. So I'm glad to mention that he has been working on this, how central banks should create money, how the money in the economy created afterwards. So it is riba free. That is also has to be done. Okay. Now, there are issues, or there are further areas that we need to develop this model. So the way it works is that basically printing money or determining the growth rate of money. What is determining the growth of money in his model is the growth rate of the economy, right? So you have to print as much as the growth rate of the economy. That's very good, but it is difficult to understand the growth rate of the forecasted growth of the economy, right? So what you need to do, you basically need to guess, try to find out that growth of the rate of economy from his CDC, okay? So the rate of return on those CDC is going to determine the growth rate of monetary aggregate. That is excellent. But there are issues with that, or further avenues that we need to work on this. Well, all growth rates are not the same. Okay, some of them are more volatile, some of them are less volatile. So the return on CDC is not going to reflect the growth rate. So what else is going to play is the risk, okay, volatility in the economy. The volatility, more than that, the price of risk. So the way we price the risk in economy is very important. So basically risk premium is very important. So risk premium is composed of two things. The amount of risk was simply volatility and the price of risk. So we need to add those elements into this model to understand really the amount of money that central banks is going to generate, right, create. So that is something that we need to work on that. Well, these days we have huge problem in fiscal policies. The huge amount of that the government that generated all over the world, right? So fiscal policy is going to be another dimension of macroeconomic policy. I'm glad that Prof. Mabit works on fiscal policy and the key ingredients of fiscal policy. And finally, monetary policy and fiscal policy have international dimension, right? International monetary system, international financial system is very important. So you need to also determine your international monetary system and your exchange rate policy, right? Again, Prof. Mabit says a lot about inflation, exchange rate, fiscal policy, and together monetary policy. So I'm really pleased to hear his idea. I'm sure that his orphan is going to be adopted by others, and we will see more works along your ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Charlie, for the wonderful comments. And so now I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience here. As for online, on behalf of the organizer, we would like to apologize because due to some technical problems, we cannot have it on online. So now the floor is open for you to ask our speaker and also Prof. Tola, inshallah. We start with Brother Hamdan first. The mic is at the back.
Can I, before we start questions, can I just have what I call for 2 or 3 minutes personal notes? I wanted to say that in the beginning, but I wasn't sure that you wanted to listen to this. You see, when I consider myself as a late bloomer. What do you mean by that? That when I get an idea, I have many ideas, but they are so naive, so simple. They need to develop. Let me give you an example. The problem of aggregation that I started talking about. It is, I have the basic ideas, but it needs some more time, maybe another 6 months or a year to develop. I was lucky that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left me in this life for so long, actually for too long. I am suffering now, having to use walking stick and things like that. So this is the first thing. Second, I have divided the topics of Islamic finance into small parts. And I have written a paper on each part. And when you go to Google, you will find these papers there. Okay? So they are partial analysis of smaller partial problems. When you put them together, they have helped me in putting things together. When I was here in NCF, of course, I wrote lecture notes and I gave them to the students, electronic files. And so I thought I would write this book, my book, within months. But I stayed 2 years here without being able to produce the first volume. Why did I get stuck? Because every topic that I wanted to, or at least I consider Islamic economics to be a branch of economics. Although this is against custom, we have been raised among Islamic economists who do more Sharia analysis than economic analysis. I don't want to have anything to do with Sharia. Well, I will accept whatever rules that the Sharia scholars give me, but I will not discuss it with them. I will not compete with them. I am an economist. A Sharia scholar cannot become an economist even if he spent the rest of his life to do that. I cannot do the same also as a Sharia scholar. So I will keep my duties within economics. The second thing here is that when I every chapter that I wrote, I had to get all what was written in this topic by conventional economists, evaluate it, criticize it, and then build on it. So imagine 20 or more than 20 chapters in every volume doing like that. I have in the second volume more than 1,500 references. You see what I mean? It's a much bigger job. That's why, in see, after 2 years, they said, you didn't produce the job, the book. We are mad at you. You see what I mean? So the people who were kind enough to give me more time were the Turks. You see, the Turkish university said, you do it whenever you can. You know, take your time, no problem, no problem. They never push me. So and once I got the first volume, they published it and put it in. I told them I want the book to be on the internet on a link for free. Why? Because I don't have many hasanat. I want to have knowledge to be benefited, to benefit people before after I die. So you just leave it there. This is يعني free hasanat without having to pay money. And the second volume also they will publish in the same way. The second personal note, or the other personal note that I want to tell you is that I was not aware of the importance of the macroeconomic model. Although I wrote its article in Arabic, you will find it in the internet in Arabic, 1981, published by the University of King Abdulaziz University, as a pamphlet. And once this was published, I got a phone call from Sheikh Saleh Kamel. He was one of the pioneers of Islamic banking, rahimahullah. He called me and said, I want to see you. I want to get to know you. I went to his office. It was really, of course, for me, a poor scholar with a Saudi Arabian billionaire who, with an Islamic perspective, it was an honor for me. And he praised my model. Of course, at that time, I didn't understand why. But later on, I understood it. I'm coming to this. The whole thing is that I am giving a solution that has two objectives. The first objective is a solution for academics, that you have volume 1, Islamic Macroeconomics. It provides an alternative theory to Marshallian analysis, and volume 2 for the macroeconomics, which provides, I hope, a more effective revolution than the one that Keynes had in mind. And also the handbook of Islamic finance, which provides definitions, precise definitions for every Islamic finance product. And this can be used by academicians to teach Islamic economics. But I advise all of you to add the book of Steve Keen, Debunking Economics, because this is the critique of neoclassical economics. I've learned a lot from that. Of course, I was hoping to do this, but luckily, alhamdulillah, somebody else came and did it. A survey of what is wrong with neoclassical economics. And some of these things were too obvious, and they're published somewhere, but nobody talks about them. I'll give you an example. Perfect competition. What is perfect competition? It's a state where no seller can influence the total supply. In other words, every seller produces so little. Now, using mathematical notation, it is the production of every seller is infinitesimally small. Okay? Now, if 1 million sellers change their production, how much is 1 million multiplied by 1 million infinitesimally small quantity? It should be big. But what they had in mind, that they're confusing, the neoclassics, confusing an infinitesimally small quantity with a zero. If you ask Al-Khwarizmi, who invented the zero, what is the zero? It is nothing. But infinitesimally small, it is something. And when you have many of them, many of these quantities, they will become substantial. So we have many of the logical inconsistencies in neoclassical economics that Islamic economists should be aware of. And I benefit from that. And I think if you want to have a good curriculum, if you wish to have my book, of course, I appreciate that, but add to it Steve Keen. This is a must. Now, also, it is made for policy. So you have a model. You see, Keynes did a good job against neoclassical economics. Although, he wrote his book in 1936. In 1937, Hicks and Mead wrote 2 articles. They published them in the Econometrica, and they had a meeting, and they decided that Keynes was only a special. It's not a general theory. It's a special case. So his theory was counteracted. So there was a counter-revolution. Like Morsi, Dr. Mohammed Morsi, the former president of Egypt, who died in prison. We made a revolution. We put him in power through free elections. He ruled for a year, but at the end of the year, Sisi came and threw him out. So this is, of course, the laws of physics. Every action produces a reaction of equal amount and equal power, opposite direction. So here we have for policymakers a way that any economy, any country, Islamic country that wants to be an economic power, world, either regional or world economic power, it can. It can even get its currency to be a reserve currency. Of course, that would take some negotiations internationally. So what I'm saying, these are my personal notes. And of course, I leave it to the management of the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Prof, for the additional notes. Now let's go to the first question from Brother Hamdan, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Prof. Ma'bid, and also Prof. Turele for the speech.
Before that, maybe Brother, you can introduce yourself briefly to Prof.
My name is Hamdan. I actually one of your students 5 years ago in 2017 while I'm doing MSc here, my question is when looking at your model in expanding the money, we should look at the growth of the economy, which is from the we can look at the rate of returns on CDCs, and the benefit of that we have zero inflation. But as our money is appreciating, our cost of exporting will also be increasing. I mean, our export will be suppressed because the high value of our money. So how do we tackle that problem in appreciating environment, in appreciating currency environment?
Just let me understand what you're saying. You're saying that on the one side, or on the one hand, the exchange rate of your currency is appreciating. On the other side, you cannot export, but your economy is growing, and you have a lot of commodities that you want to export. So how can you solve that? Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's of course it's a very good question, but you see, higher productivity in exports means what? Lower prices or higher prices? Let's think about it in domestic currency. You have a higher productivity in the economy. You have a lot of investment. You're encouraging technological changes and so on. So you have higher productivity. And you see, we are not having diminishing returns. This is one of the mistakes of the neoclassical economics, because the neoclassics assumed that you have full capacity of capital and you're adding labor. And of course, you add labor and you add, and the returns would go down, marginal returns go down. But we don't design factories like that. We do not design. Factories are designed not with a fixed capital capacity. It's so we might have even increasing returns. If you're encouraging investment in a country, you are raising productivity. If you're raising productivity, you are reducing prices. Now, if prices at worst are reduced by the same percentage of exchange rate appreciation, you're okay. You still can export. Okay? You're convinced? All right.
Well, as far as I know, you have also another solution in your paper that central banks basically deals with investment in foreign countries. So through that, you try to address the appreciation of local currency. Am I right? That's what I read in your paper.
Well, you see, the currency appreciation is just a byproduct. It's a byproduct, and it's a byproduct of the absolute price stability. And it is in the hands of the central bank. If the central bank thinks that the currency is appreciating too much, it can control that by exceeding or causing monetary expansion to exceed the rate of growth. So, but if you, of course, there is nothing inevitable in the model. In other words, nobody says that keep your currency appreciating and do not do anything. You have to balance things. That's the idea. So actually, we need a governor of the central bank who can also manage that. Yani, and of course, because I forgot to talk about that we are, in order to get all of this seniorage, you have to have total reserve system. So the central bank governor of an Islamic country that follows this model is the most powerful in the country as well as in the world. Why? Because nobody can, he really controls everything. He controls most of the investment. He controls the foreign sector indicators and so on. So there are a lot of policy flexibility, a lot of policy balances, and the choices are those for the policy makers to make. There is a lot of freedom here.
Next question. Please pass the microphone to over there.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Professor Mabit and Professor Turulai, for the sessions given. My name is Shafendi Shafril. I am a PhD student, SIF, and I'm from Indonesia. Basically, I want to ask about the one things that mentions by Mabit regarding the printing money, that if we move from the current economics to the Islamic economic model, as to mentions that we need move from the lending-based system, which is the best kind of the things, to the interest-free models, which is under the Islamic bank or the Islamic economic models. And you mentioned about the conventional bank should put the investment into the commercial bank as investment account rather than lending it to the commercial bank. And then I would like to clarify to ask your opinion about this also, because according to the MMT theory, does it mean that the government nothing to do with collecting the tax anymore and lending money, but they rely on the printing money and invest it in the real sector in order to improve the economics? Is that what you mean in order to printing money from the central bank? And also I want to ask about how can the central bank itself put the money in the commercial bank with the investment account? Does that mean that the commercial bank nothing to do with deposit taking anymore? I mean, if we talk about the assets and the liability sides of the Islamic banking for the bank itself, because if we put it in investment account, meaning to say that there is no capital guarantee from the bank to the central bank. There's no capital guarantee, and we're not allowed to guarantee the capital which is invested in the bank itself. So how can we make sure that it's safe, and how can we do a risk management of it? Thank you, Professor.
Mr. Chairman, can you summarize the question, because my hearing is not working very well.
I'm not really sure also about this question. So maybe after this, you make it short, straightforward to Prof. I mean,
Okay,
so
Prof.
that, yeah.
My question is like this.
Why don't you come forward in the
Okay.
front, and maybe I can hear you, but and bring the mic with you. Yes.
My question is when, as you mentioned before, that we need to move from the lending-based system to the interest-free kind of the system. So one the things that you mentioned in your model is we need to put the money to the bank as investment account rather than the lending account. So meaning to say that in Islamic banking and economics, we know that if you put the money in the investment account, there's no capital guarantee. There's no capital guarantee. So is that meaning to say that the bank itself did not guarantee the capital to return it back to the central bank itself? So my question is the risk management of doing this. Yeah.
You see, suppose we have the Professor Kinch in the governor of the central bank. Now, the Minister of Finance will say, this man has too much power. And he can direct the investment in the country any way he wants. So let's have an investment committee that would set our investment plan and give objectives. Yeah, stay with me here. Give objectives to the investment, because we were targets. So actually, and that's why I'm saying that the model is just a plan with many empty spaces, and there are certain missing parts that should be put there. And I'm leaving this to politics. So what we're saying here is that, yes, we have no borrowing. The word borrowing will get out of our, will be removed from our dictionary. Only financing. You want money, you have finance. We have 20 contracts for this, maybe more. I have the 20 contracts are listed in the first volume. And so we will realize that this country has to have not only a monetary policy, a fiscal policy, an investment policy, a development policy, employment policy. All of these should be considered together. So this is, of course, has been detailed in some parts of the book, and some of them are still missing. I cannot write everything I know in one whole life. Yeah, I have to leave this to some of my students to finish. And actually, this is one of my personal notes that I hope that when I die, you make the second edition of my book and add anything to it. There are no copyrights. Do it, no problem. So I can see that you have problems because of the model is too compact, too summarized, and that has some details are missing, are left to the circumstances of recovery. But there is one thing that I want to mention, that it's an Islamic macroeconomic model. Would a country that does not like Islam, that has a strong sense of Islamophobia, would they apply it? No. This is an Islamic bomb that only Muslims can use. You see what I mean? In other words, Greece, we know the feeling of Greece about Islam and about Turkey. And about, Egypt too, because Greece used to be a colony of Egypt when Egypt was part of the Ottoman Empire. It used to rule Greece. Would they apply the Islamic economy? Not now, not in this century, maybe in the next century. You see what I mean? So this is something that is ours, and nobody will want to use it unless he wants to come forward and say, oh, I am a Muslim, or I like Islam, or Islam has some good ideas. We're having a revolution. We're telling the whole world, this is a better alternative what you have. Just like Tawheed. We're telling Christians and Jews, we have Tawheed. It's much better than you have. So that's the idea. But if I haven't answered your questions, ask more questions.
Maybe Prof. Dolly want to say something?
Yes, sir.
I think his model works as follows. So you have money, and the central bank issues CDC, and you buy those CDCs. So you don't put your money in individual banks. You put your money in the CDs issued by the central bank. So it is basically insured by the central banks, just like the deposit insured by the government due to deposit insurance scheme. So in other words, basically you are not putting your money in individual banks. Rather that you are putting your money in a pool of investment, and for that central bank issues certificates.
Like kind of the sovereign fund like that.
Well, you may say so, but it is different. Right? This is basically issued by the central bank, and there is no possibility of default, right? There is no possibility of bankruptcy in this system, because you are not investing your deposit, you are not having a deposit in individual banks.
Thank you very much.
Is it 100% recovered?
Yeah, it is a narrow banking system in his model rather than fractional reserve system. So it is 100% reserve.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the answer.
Maybe we give to sister first, then we come back to brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Really appreciate the perspective. Really appreciate perspective that Professor Mabit as well as Professor Torelli has shared today. The question I have is in relation to this scenario where since money supply in your model is tied to economic growth, in a scenario where the economy is experiencing negative growth, how would the model apply?
Well, negative growth rate means you're going to reduce the money supply in the economy. Okay, not negative growth rate, but growth rate means in this case is reducing the money supply through open market operations by the central bank. Yeah.
in the conventional system, but in the model that
In the model, yes, in the model that's central bank supposed to do open market operations, meaning that to control monetary supplies according to economic growth rate. So if the growth rate is negative 2%, so you have to reduce the money supply by 2% by buying and selling those certificates that that we mentioned earlier on.
Next, is Deborah.
No, I just want to. So there's a negative growth in the economy. Right now, we have to extend the economy by credit supply of money. And in that case, it is contracting further.
Well, that's the policy, okay? So you may change your policy and try to introduce more money. But, when you have a system like that, the mechanically it works like that. But of course, you have policies that your central bank should have, whether it should, promote the economy or not. So as I said, 100 years ago, during the gold standard, that was the issue. The supply of gold was limited, but the economy was growing. So it was difficult to print money, right? So that led to what we call is depreciation, the negative growth rate. So it worsens the problem. So, therefore, in this model, whether you're going to implement your model mechanically or you're going to introduce some sort of policy and, increase the monetary growth rate.
Okay, Jista.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Amreen Sultan, and I'm from International Islamic University, Malaysia. I'm doing PhD in economics. Thank you for clarifying these misconceptions about theory of interest. Unfortunately, we in Muslim countries try to copy the conventional solutions to overcome macroeconomic problems. My question is that in a very globally integrated world that we are living, sometimes many countries are reluctant to be the first mover to adopt something like this, like in model, even if they are convinced that it is going to solve their problem. And you mentioned that this model is for Malaysia, Turkey, and Indonesia, whereby there are not 100% Muslim population living. There are multiple ethnic religious groups living. So how about the will they buy will the government face challenges to adopt this model? Because you said that it is not for non-Muslims. So what about Pakistan? Pakistan is a Muslim majority country, but you mentioned that this model needs to be adopted in a country where there is already political will and infrastructure developed. So.
I just wanted to, first of all, there are people who are watching this lecture in Turkey. And one of them is Dr. Burak Chikril, who is one of our faculty in ASBO, Ankara Social Sciences, Social Bilimler or Sciences University. And he says that money is invested in banks according to Mudaraba. It is not exclusively flowing into banks through CDCs. So the central bank puts money, and even people also can put investment accounts in banks. That's what he said. He said, he asked me to make this point to you. Of course, I hope he's listening, and I hope he's happy with this.
Well, let me ask a question. You asked very good questions, but politics is not my expertise, so I I would say in answering your question, but anything to do with economics or policy oriented, I will welcome any questions, but it is politics, how you get initiative. Only thing that I can say is that most governments are really very innovative when it comes to monetary policy these days. The monetary policy almost reinvented every year. In the wake of global financial crisis that we had in 2008, 2009, and then the COVID pandemic, and then some other issues, basically led central banks to innovate new monetary policies. That is the case in across the world, especially advanced economies. US has really unconventional monetary policy. Europeans have unconventional monetary policy. Japanese monetary policy is really difficult to understand. You cannot really frame them using any monetary policy in textbook that you could find. So governments are very innovative these days, or central banks are very innovative. We'll see, there will be more innovation from other countries or not.
So the political will is very important to test the model, Prof. What do you mean by that? I mean, political will determine whether the model can be executed or not.
Well, we have been discussing this these days in the presence of digital currency, right? How the central bank should issue digital currency, how the proceeds should be used, whether central bank should use positive or negative interest rate. So it has been a big debate these days going on. That is very related to what Prof. Mabit has been doing over the years. So what I'm trying to say that an implementation of these ideas is going to be carried over in the adaptation of central bank digital currency.
Next, again.
I want to ask one. Is it something like perpetual quantitative?
So what?
It is something like quantitative easing in a perpetual way?
So you mean digital currency? Yeah.
Because it seems to be quantitative easing type of approach, isn't it?
Well, it works through quantitative money, right? And that quantitative money determined by the growth rate of the economy. Yes, that is, you can do quantitative easing, you can do, quantitative tightening. That depends on what I said earlier on, the policy of the central bank or the policy of governments.
Can I just comment on the question that was asked by one of our sisters, that we live in a country where there are non-Muslims. Can we apply a macroeconomic and Islamic macroeconomic model in a country with multiple or other minorities or even majorities? Doesn't matter. It all depends on the benefits. You want to apply a system, you have to explain to your citizens that this is for you. What are you going to get from that? The government will remove all of your income taxes, or maybe income taxes on the lower brackets. It's benefit to everybody. It's not going to benefit to all Muslims. We will have a stronger currency. You will have a cheaper imports. You will have a faster growing economy. So there are so many benefits, and there is nothing in this model that would restrict benefits to Muslims. We cannot, actually in Islam, we cannot do that. We cannot discriminate. If If you're a citizen, you get all the benefits. And of course, you will face all the costs like everybody else. So now I have no problem with this. And I have no problem. Not only that, for Christians and Jews, listen, you Ahl al-Kitab, people of the book, listen, we are removing interest, riba, something that you could not do. It is in your holy book, but you could not implement it. As a matter of fact, your religious scholars try to go around this, to beat around the bush, and to say, no, this to confuse interest with usury. Usury is just very extremely high rates of interest. These are not the same thing as interest. So the Christian scholars and the Jewish scholars says the Bible talks about usury, not about interest. But we're saying no, we are not they're the same to us. So we are actually just like when you become a Muslim, you can appreciate Jesus Christ and Moses better, respect him better, understand the glory of God better. Then, so we are also enabling you to practice your religion better.
Prof, can I ask you a question regarding the Islamic economics? Right? So interest rate, one issue, right? Another issue is the maturity issue, right? So let's say that you have riba-free economy, but if you have really fixed maturity instrument, economic system or financial system, really you have another risk, which is called rollover risk. So I don't know how important you think to move from fixed maturity system to infinite maturity system. Basically, it is about debt contracts and equity contracts, right? There are two differences between those two contracts. The first is that the debt contracts come with interest rate, but also it comes with a fixed maturity, right? The other one comes with no interest rate, but at the same time it comes with infinite maturity. So how do we address this rollover risk issue in Islamic finance?
You see, Professor Kinj, we don't have an interest rate here. Yes. And we don't have mixed, maturity either. You can set the
I think investment accounts,
investment accounts, they can be
short maturity.
Yeah, you see banks.
If they are kind of open and funds.
You see, Professor, it is all in the hands of the central bank. The central bank can say, Mudaraba accounts can terminate every quarter and be renewable every quarter, or can terminate at the end of every year to be renewable. But it also can say that the customers, the Mudarib and the bank, Rabbul Mals and the bank can agree with whatever maturity they have. So we have.
Yeah, but that is going to be issue.
Yes.
Paying interest rate in the presence of loss-making situations. Yes, it's a risk. It's not a good idea. You're not doing risk sharing, but at the same time, if your investment is a fixed maturity investment, then you have a serious risk, which is rollover risk, right?
But you see,
you have to find funding.
The maturity can be determined either depending on the investment horizon, that if you have, so if you're financing trade, then you have a maturity of a horizon of 3 months or 6 months. But if you are financing an industrial project, it might be 2 or 3 or 4 years. Also, so this is the physically determined maturity. And there are other maturities like mudaraba. It can be continuous mudaraba. It can terminate anytime if you want to. Of course, but generally speaking, and I'm really grateful for the presence of Professor Kinj with us, because you see, you give a model to, and Professor Kinj is not just an economist, he's a banker. So the first thing a banker thinks about is what? Is risk. Is it risky or not? And this is quite natural, and that's necessary. So we have to quieten the fears of bankers. And that's why I'm saying, you see, I have given you all the money supply under the authority of bankers. And I know that bankers are very careful. You see, one of the benefits of universal banking is that universal bank can take shares in the companies which it finances. And it says here that a banker, when he or she sits in a board of directors company, he acts like a banker. He wants to be careful about everything. So the governance of the company itself becomes a banker's like. So this is a benefit. This model is giving the chance of bankers to have their say on risk, and to make sure that we are, as a matter of fact, we are rationalizing the investment decisions of the whole economy, because we are putting it in the hands of the central bank and member banks. And they know more about risk than we economists. Economists sometimes, they gamble, okay? We have derivatives. أظن Western economists do not mind derivatives, but they're gambling contracts. So the element of risk in this model is very much reduced, controlled, because of the role of the central bank and the role of banks in financing, in using the money supply and financing investment.
Okay, Prof. Maybe we get one more question. So now we are supposed to stop at 4:30. Can we, or we have three hands at the back. Okay, Dr. Nizam. Okay, Nizam, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Dr. Nizam from IIUM. A very short question from Ma'bid. Macroeconomic policy is about economic stabilization. So how would counter-cyclical monetary policy is done in this proposed model? Thank you. Counter-cyclical monetary policy.
Could you repeat that?
How do you do counter-cyclical monetary policy in this model?
But you see, what you should have asked first, do we have an economic cycle, or a business cycle in this model or not? You see, after the battle of new classics and Keynesians and new Keynesians, they started talking about the real business cycle. Okay, do we have a cycle here? Do we have a business cycle here or not? What would be the source of it? Of course, I haven't written anything about this in the book, and this is one of the things that I want to look at. But frankly, I do not see any reason for business cycle in this model. No reason whatsoever, unless we have a natural disaster. Okay, if a crop failure, a flood, something like that. But why should businesses become pessimistic all of a sudden? Yeah, we can just do more investment, give them more finance. There are so many things, you know, you see the industry, if you have a good project with a good feasibility study, you can finance it in this model. There is no problem. So why should we have business cycle? Business cycle is something that, you know, you have a wave of pessimism that comes somehow into the economy. And this is because everybody becomes pessimistic about the future. Of course, natural disasters cannot be avoided. And we can, you know, for natural disasters. And since Professor Kenji is with us, Turkey now needs to have a lot of reconstruction. Imagine if they applied the model now and can collect all this seigniorage. The reconstruction would be no problem. Or issued REITs, that's the real estate investment units. And the people will get part of the rent of the new units to be built, to be constructed. So in this model, we can deal even better with natural disaster. Not only that, how about the financial crisis? You know, like, but you see the financial crisis happened, why? Because people have reissued or they cheated on subprime debt. They made it look better, and people bought it and got caught in it. So, but you see, in the Western model, they go ahead and bail out the lender. In our model, we don't bail out lenders, we bail out borrowers. So they bailed out lenders, and lenders stop lending, and borrowers, who are the majority, stop buying. So we have a recession. That's why the financial crisis was called the Great Recession. But in our model, the government or the central bank or the banking system should subsidize borrowers, bail them out. So they will continue to spend. And we don't, the economy will not fall into recession. So this is a model that gives, no matter what problem you think of, it gives you a better solution, a better way out. This is what really makes market capitalism make it look so miserable from our Islamic point of view. And that's why I said it is our duty, the duty of Muslims, to tell the whole world we have a better alternative, much better.
Okay, bro. Maybe
just one short question.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Mabit. My name is Omar, doing PhD in economics from IUM. First of all, thank you for preparing. In 2019, you joined us in France on CIE as one of the speakers. So I really would like to thank you for that. My question is in regard to, let's take a real example of one country that is trying to not to utilize interest rate, which is Turkey right now. So let's take Turkey as an example. Turkey does not want to, its president does not want to raise interest rate, and the impact is the currency is depreciated, but the economy is booming. So what are your guys' comments for that?
Did you hear his question?
So he's asking about the monetary policy of Turkey that central bank is cutting interest rate and currency is depreciating and the economy is booming. And what is your take on this?
I think Professor Kinch can answer this question better, but I want to say that Turkey, unfortunately, not only Turkey, all Muslim countries apply the same market capitalism that's applied in the United States, which is subject to the same problems. And if they have a problem, the solution has to also be conventional. Of course, I mentioned to you that when President Erdogan sees that the liras are going down, the exchange rate of the lira, and they tell them, raise the rate of interest. He says people will withdraw the money from the real sector to the financial sector in order to earn more interest. And this sounds reasonable. Okay, what can you do in this situation? Nothing. This is we are applying an macroeconomic model, that's market capitalism, which is in a limp. When it comes to a problem, it cannot solve it. It cannot. The 1930 Great Depression has not been solved. It took a long time in order to get rid of it. And Keynes he provided a solution, dig holes in the ground and fill them up. You see what I mean? And of course, the last financial crisis, nobody even was able to predict it. Of course, there are 12 people who predicted it, including Steve Keen. But the Queen attended the seminar, the late Queen Elizabeth, attended seminar in London School of Economics, and said, how come nobody warned us about this? And they told us, Your Majesty, it couldn't have been predicted, couldn't have been foreseen. That's the problem of the system. We are switching to something that everything is in our hands. We can solve any problem. No question about it. And you cannot have a better system than this. And this system is not the invention of Ma'bad Al-Jarhi. It is the understanding, my understanding when I read the Quran and Sunnah. It is a system that implements Islamic teachings in the economic sector. That's all what it is.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, actually we need to stop at 4:45, but maybe I will take one more question from, to be fair to our sister, from Dr. Hanim, is it? Yeah, Dr. Hanim, please. Where's the mic?
So far away.
Will you pass the mic to Dr. Hanim?
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Great to see you again. Alhamdulillah. Okay, Prof. I have actually two questions, not two questions, two issues actually.
Can you hear us? Yes. Yes. Going to ask two questions. So she's going to ask two questions.
Yes, okay.
Can you hear me now, Prof?
Yeah, we do hear you well.
Thank you. Okay, Prof. Actually, I have two issues or maybe event, if I may say, that I try to visualize your model and how this model going to be implemented in these two particular so-called issues and event. Okay, basically I understood very well your model. You also share your insight on my paper as well. So what we understood on your model, actually, the model very much applicable to the traditional so-called banking model, right? But now we are talking about the new development, so-called banking 4.0. So there's a book written by Brad King on 4.0. And then now the new development called Challenger Bank. Okay, so I would like to see, or maybe to get your insight and comment, how this kind of model can be implemented in this kind of new development, banking 4.0 or maybe this new so-called challenger bank? That is one. The second question is on how basically this is considered a good model. And when we look at the recent development of Silicon Valley Bank collapse, how basically this model can exactly provide solution to this kind of issues. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you. That is the last question. Okay, Prof. Professor Lai or Prof. Mabit can respond to that.
Would you like to answer?
Yes, what is it?
So the first question is, given that we have digital banks these days, whether your model works in the presence of digital banks. And then the second question, a new bank in America became bankrupt because of the concentration risk that they took. How your model prevent that sort of bankruptcies?
Well, digital banks do not represent any problem because you see, it's just a matter of technology here. We are making accounts. This is fintech, yani. This is, we are making accounts more accessible, transferring money much easier, and so on. We're using plastic instead of cash, of banknotes. It's no big problem. But how can we avoid the crisis of banks, like the Silicon Valley Bank and so on? There are 3 banks which have failed already, and they're talking now about Swiss, Credit Suisse, that it's going to fail soon. I don't know if this will happen or not. But anyway, banks' failure, the most important reason is that conventional banks, by nature, are less stable. Why? Because their deposits are guaranteed. They must repay deposits. But their assets have different qualities. They can be very high quality and they can be low quality. A bank with low quality assets will fail because it has to pay depositors. At the same time, it does not have enough money or income from its assets to cover that. An Islamic bank is much more stable because its liabilities is only, actually doesn't have any liabilities because Mudaraba accounts are not a liability. If the bank makes profit, it will give you a profit. If it loses, you share the loss. So the bank is safe either way. So yes, Islamic banks are more stable. Of course, the central bank in an Islamic macroeconomic model will make sure that banks will have good practices, that it will not put money in bad investment or give money to or make money exposed to people who will not pay. That's the idea. So we are safer, and our system is not exposed to the same risks like the conventional system. We have many measures, many checks and balances in our system that would help us avoid the problems in which market capitalism fails or falls.
Okay, if we're talking about challenger bank, which is not tied with any sovereign country, and then taking your model, using CDC as OMO tools, then this is my ignorance. Maybe I try to visualize that. How could we use this CDC to this kind of challenger bank?
So these new digital banks, how they can use your CDCs, how they can invest in your CDCs?
You see, imagine a regular bank. It gets money from customers who are Rabbul Mal on Mudaraba basis. Okay? Those customers can deposit their money in the bank through electronic transfers. Okay? They can get the profits of their Mudaraba accounts also electronically, either to in their account or withdraw it or send it anywhere in the world. The bank can finance its customers also through opening account with them and feed these accounts electronically. There is no problem in the technical aspect. I used to work as a computer programmer when I was a student in the United States, but at the same time, at that time, we didn't use the languages of today. We used Fortran and things like that. It's the same thing, same problem. There is no problem, except that hopefully those banks would have lower cost because of electronic transfers. They would have a lower administrative cost.
Prof, you want to add something?
No, I don't. Well, maybe a couple of words regarding the digital banks. Well, the aspect of digital banks is, or the digital finance is, it's a peer-to-peer finance, right? Rather than, intermediating finance, it's just a peer-to-peer finance. So you find the company to invest and you find the business to invest, rather than put your money in a bank and then bank transfers your money in those investments. So it's kind of peer-to-peer investment. So that aspect of digital banking or digital finance is very important going forward. So we are basically losing the central intermediation authorities. Coming back to the second question, it's a huge concentration risk that SVB took. I remember Credit Suisse CEO that I talked late 2016. Since then, they also invested heavily in fintech. So this is a huge, really concentration risk. I think it's really difficult to find any kind of solution. You have to basically regulate those banks that they cannot take huge concentration risk. Basically, the SVB and other banks, including Credit Suisse, invested heavily in the fintech industry. These days, those fintech industry is not doing well because hype disappeared, and then the investors realized that the growth that they promised is not going to be delivered. So investors are basically running away from those positions.
There is one thing I want to add. One thing I noticed, which is very, very positive from your questions, that writing and talking about Islamic economics gets you interested in the economics of Islamic finance, the economic effect, consequences, ma'alat in Arabic. You see, we have been, and this is one of the problems of the Islamic economics, that we have been since the 50s of last century talking about Islamic finance. What can we say about Islamic economics? It's about time. And I think today you have proven that all of your questions have been directed towards economic issues.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for the final notes. With that, a very good discussions. Hopefully, the discussion at least has given us some basic understanding, some basis of of the model, I do believe that many things that we can do to make the model, better from time to time, inshallah. Then maybe after this, maybe the audience, maybe you can personally communicate with Prof. Mabit and Prof. Turala as well. And also, maybe if Prof. Mabit have, you don't mind, Prof, maybe you can share the link of your books for audience to get access to the book and read your ideas, and inshallah from there all of us will benefit from the book, inshallah. And with the ladies and gentlemen, the talk has come to its end. And once again, we truly appreciate everyone for your participation, both here at the auditorium.
Before we do that, just I want to have one remark. Somebody asked about quantitative easing, and if we have in this model something like this. Now, quantitative easing means what? When the banking system is in trouble and it has some bad assets, so the central bank buys those assets at par so that banks will not lose. We don't have this. We don't have debt. This is some kind of a debt trading, buying debt assets. Muslims are not supposed to trade in debt. Despite what Islamic banks do in this case, debt trading and tawarruq and etc. and Ina, we don't do that. So there is no such thing as quantitative easing here. Every bank would do its own investments and financing under the control of the central bank, and the central bank does not buy bad assets.
Okay, thank you for the last note, inshallah. Then with that, on behalf of the organizing committees from Islamic University, I'm Wan Arif, your MC for today. Would like to apologize for any shortcomings throughout the event. And then with that, we end our discussion session today with Surah Tasbih al-Farah and Surah Al-Asr. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان. Once again, Prof, thank you for your presence and your ideas. Thank you very much. Goodbye and have a great day, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.